Does it seem to you that the media is always talking about how bad the real estate market is in Canada? Millennials can't buy a house. Homeownership rates are declining. It's so unaffordable, it's going to take you 2 decades to save up that down payment. Well, is it really that bad? On this episode of Ball Prairie Real Estate, I want to compare the media hype to the reality of the Canadian real estate market. And some of these stats are going to surprise you. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ball Prairie Real Estate, where I educate you all about Canadian real estate. If you're new here, my name is Matthew Fife. I'm a real estate agent from Regina, Saskatchewan. Now this is part 2 of a series of videos that I'm doing that I've called the Canadian housing crisis. Part 1, I talked about the severe lack of inventory of homes available in Canada. And there's some really interesting information. If you haven't checked that out, I'm gonna put the link to that video in the description so you can watch that. On this video, I'm gonna be talking about the media hype around the real estate market versus the actual reality of what's going on in the Canadian housing market right now. And no matter what the media says, the message I want to send is, yes, you can buy a house in Canada. And if you are thinking about buying a house and you want me to help you select the best agent for you, my contact information is below, and I'd be happy to set you up with the best agent for you in your area. But before we get into this video, let's do what we always do and start off with another terrible joke. Recently, I've been talking about the benefits of dried grapes. It's all about raising awareness. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in a future episode that's way better than that joke, put it in the comments below. How many times have you heard that millennials will never be able to buy a house? And I understand that in some markets where you have to have $100,000 or $200,000 down payment just to buy a home, how much of a barrier to entry for aspiring homeowners that is. If you want, I have done a video on some tips to save for your down payment. I'll put the link to that in the description below, and one of these pop-up cards will come up so you can check that one out. What I'm trying to say though is the doom and gloom headlines that millennials will never buy a house are just that, headlines, doom and gloom. The stats don't lie. In 2019, Stats Canada put out a report looking at home ownership rates amongst millennials. So they classified millennials as those under 34 at the time. They compared this information and looked at it from 1971 to 2016. The average home ownership rate for a 34-year-old during that time period was about 42%. At the end of 2016, home ownership rate amongst 34-year-olds was 43%. So more Canadians that were 34 years old owned a home in 2016 than the average from 1971 to 2016. More interesting though is that while homeownership rate was higher amongst that group in Canada, homeownership rate amongst 34-year-olds in Canada is higher than many other countries in the world. The United States, for example, I think a fairly comparable country to Canada, homeownership rate amongst 34-year-olds was 34%. Okay, I can see the angry typing in the comments right now about how I'm using old, outdated data, and of course it's gotten way worse since 2016. And yes, that's the most recent data we have from Stats Canada. But in the meantime, Royal LePage, a number of mortgage insurers and banks have all been doing studies and surveys to look at buyer preferences in the last 18 months. And one thing that has come out of that is nearly 25% of millennials have bought a house in the last 18 months. And I bet when Stats Canada has a more recent update, you're gonna see millennial home ownership rate is higher than what it was in 2016. We'll have to wait on that data, but I'm gonna put a bet on that one. And if you know me, I'm not much of a betting man. So while the headlines are telling you that millennials will never be able to buy a house, the data shows that they are, and they're buying homes at higher rates than they have in the past and higher rates than other countries. Another media headline I seem to see a lot is that while it's almost impossible to buy a house, even those that own their home can't afford to continue to make those payments, or it's almost unaffordable. Let's start with those that own a home and it's so unaffordable. An important stat that you want to look at and keep track of is mortgage delinquency rates. That is people that are more than 90 days behind on their mortgage. That's considered delinquent. That's also often when the foreclosure process will start. So if you're behind in your payment and the bank is going to start foreclosing on your home, generally it's going to be 90 days and sometimes even sooner. Before the 2008 real estate crash in the United States, mortgage delinquency rate there was 3.5%. Before the pandemic here in Canada, so before any mortgage deferrals were available, and those are basically all done now at this point, but before those were available, mortgage delinquency rates in Canada was 0.25%. So nowhere even close to what we saw in the United States before the big massive real estate crash that they had there. Now, I have been hearing kind of through the grapevine and through the rumor mill that delinquency rates are on the rise in Canada, but as of right now, I have not seen any data that is newer than what we saw before the pandemic. I'm expecting we'll start to see information trickle out over the next little while, but that's what we have to go with right now. So while you may see the headlines about how nobody can afford their mortgage right now, the data shows that almost every homeowner in Canada is not only paying their mortgage, they're paying it on time. Okay, it's trivia time. When a home buyer buys a house today, their very first mortgage payment, how much of that is interest versus how much of that goes towards paying the principal? That's the original amount that they borrowed. And how does that compare to when their parents would have bought their first house? I dare you, put your answers below in the comments section. Let's see who gets the closest. Okay, got your answers in the comments below? That home buyer today, their very first mortgage payment will be 61% going towards the principal. So meaning that over 50% of that payment that you make is paying down your mortgage. The parents' generation, 5% of that went to the principal. So while home prices are obviously much higher than when their parents are buying the houses, and down payments are much harder to come by because of how high those house prices are, home buyers today are paying substantially more down, more than their parents ever could have dreamed of on that very first mortgage payment. Okay, you nailed the trivia question. Now it's time for a pop quiz. Which one of these statements is incorrect? Home prices in Canada are higher than they ever have been. Saving for a down payment is a major hurdle for home buyers, especially first-time home buyers in Canada. And home ownership rates are higher than they ever have been. I'll let you put your answers in the comments below. If you answered none of the above, congratulations, come on down and collect your prize. That's right, homeownership rates, even with house prices being as high as they ever have been, and the significant hurdles that saving up for a down payment have become for home buyers, homeownership rates in Canada are higher than they ever have been. In the year 2000, the homeownership rate was about 63.5%. As of 2019, that's the most recent information, it was 68%. And I expect at the end of 2021, with how many people have bought a house in the last year and a half, that is going to be even higher. So after a 20-year bull run on home prices, prices now higher than they ever have been in Canada, more people than ever own the home that they live in. So while it seems almost every single week, you're gonna see an article in the news about how impossible it is to buy a house, I wanna tell you that yes, you can buy a house. Don't let the negative headlines deter you from your dream of buying a home, because clearly more Canadians than ever have realized that dream. There you have it, the media hype versus the reality of the Canadian real estate market. And if you're watching this during the federal election, right here, I got a breakdown on all the different parties' housing strategies and how it's gonna impact you. Right here is my most recent housing market update. Check that one out if you want more information on what's going on right now in the Canadian real estate market. And as always, thanks very much for watching.